Thanks for joining Let's Get to Talking, presented to you by Black Gay Table Talk. I'm Kenan.
I'm Dorian.
Join us as we take you on a journey of discussion from two Black gay male perspectives.
Get ready for authentic, heartfelt, raunchy, thought-provoking, and relatable shows.
We're happy to be a part of your podcast family.
Let's get to talking.
Thanks for joining another episode of Let's Get to Talking, presented to you by Black Gay Table Talk. I'm Kenan.
And I'm Dorian.
Yes, and for today's episode, we're talking about
masculinity.
All right, masculinity in the Black community. And actually, I want to touch on masculinity in the Black gay community too.
Okay, I like that. Let's get to talking.
Let's get to talking. All right. So I guess I'll kind of kick it off, right? So I'll say I do think that masculinity in itself, it's multifaceted, right? So it's layered and it can look different based off of the community, that the gentleman is in, right? So I guess my first question to you would be, what does masculinity mean to you? Like, what are you used to hearing the definition of masculinity being?
Wow, that was the first question I was going to ask you, but in a different way. So I'm fine with it. I know you beat me to it. Masculinity to me, my definition is someone that's confident, shows strength, not just physical strength, but the ability to display strength mentally and physically. I think someone who shows growth in their life, meaning they have patience, they're willing to learn, they're not judgmental. That to me creates masculinity. Being a leader, being able to take control of situations, and not necessarily manhandling a situation, but knowing how to take control of a situation in a positive aspect.
Okay.
I am not a fan of, I call them overachievers that just have to insert themselves in such a forceful way. That to me shows masculinity. But it goes to what you said. It's in so many different facets and different levels that it's not a one shoe fit all.
True. I agree with you on those traits being a part of what masculinity means to me. But as far as what I guess I've been taught or what the running narrative is around what masculinity means, I've often heard it be described as having strength, being strong. Boys don't cry. Not necessarily, well, no, I'll just say it, not having fear. Like, you're expected to always have courage to come off as being masculine, right? So it almost like it was a bad thing to have a fear or to be afraid or to second guess yourself. Masculinity is not second guessing yourself, knowing that you can do it, so to speak. But in addition to those things, I do agree with you as far as what it means to me today.
Okay. When you look at let's use the reality TV world. When you look at masculinity on television, what's a good example of someone that you would use as a good display of masculinity?
Oh, you know what? I don't know that I can answer that question, simply because it looks different to me than what I feel sometimes can be displayed, if that makes sense. And then too, I don't think that there's a cookie cutter
It
example
goes
of
right.
what masculinity is, you know? Do you feel that do you think that what's deemed as masculine has evolved looking at the landscape now versus, say, when you initially came out, I guess?
I think masculinity is always evolving. It's always going to change. It's always going to be looked at differently through different generation eyes.
Mhm.
I look at, I'll use some of the professional sport players, and you've always been taught to think that sport players are masculine guys.
Mhm.
But when they come out and do press conference and you look at some of the outfits that they're wearing nowadays, you get to scratching your head like, mm. But so that's a good example of what I say, it's evolving. I think being masculine shows confidence in whatever you decide to wear. But from what we've been taught in the past, when you look at those outfits that they're wearing, you do question the level of masculinity there.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I know there's some guys in my generation that's like, oh, they're just emasculating the black man. And maybe because I am gay, I look at stuff just a tad bit different and saying
Mhm.
that just because he chose to wear what he's wearing does not discredit his level of masculinity.
Mhm. True, true. Now, and I kinda touched on this a moment ago, right?
Uh,
So, do you feel that masculinity looks different for a black guy versus a white guy?
I'm going to say yes. And the reason I'm going to say that is because in the black community, we already have our what we perceive or our level of what we're expecting out of our black men versus what the white community or the other races look out of their men.
Mhm.
Black men, as you said earlier, have always been expected not to cry, always be the leader, be strong, be able
Yeah.
to fix anything.
It's funny you said that, and actually, that's a very good point. So, to first even try to evaluate or examine masculinity in the black community, you
Hmm.
have to go back. You have to go back because what masculinity is, it was embedded in our roots, right? And if you look
Right.
back at historical roots in the black community, you see that black men have long been stereotyped as being hyper masculine or
Hmm.
aggressive or dominant, right? Like when they would auction us off or auction off our brothers, they promoted them as these bulls, you know what I'm saying? As
Correct.
these hyper masculine or aggressive hard workers, laborers, that I feel like that kind of shaped what masculinity in turn ended up being for the black community in a lot of ways.
It does go back to slavery when our forefathers were being sold and how they were brought out. Look at this stud here,
Mhm.
good teeth, good hair, nice muscle structure, big
Mhm.
hands. That goes to what I think I'm trying to say, that that's only the physical attributes that black community has been taught to believe makes a
Mhm.
masculine guy.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think masculinity starts from within, actually.
Yes.
I guess where I'm going with that, you don't have to stand 6'3" and be 300 pounds to be considered masculine. Everyone's not going to be born with those stats.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, there are some of us that are only 5'8", and don't have the physical stature, but doesn't make them less of a man than the person that stands 6 feet tall.
True. I do believe that mas that those toxic, I guess, parameters that masculinity was crafted around, if that makes sense. I think all those traits, in essence, lead to, and first off, it's unrealistic expectations. These are the things that I'm talking about. The unrealistic expectations on Black men with masculinity. In the Black community as a whole, sometimes can be the reason that you see those toxic traits manifested in the form of either misogyny or homophobia, and a lot of times violence, because in essence it's being manufactured, and I won't say brainwash, but it's almost like a brainwashing that this one way is how you show up masculine as a Black man. You know what I'm saying?
Correct. That is correct, which goes to me saying you need to be intelligent to display masculinity, because the
Mhm,
ones that are not intelligent enough to know that it's beyond toting around a gun or trying to
mhm,
bully someone into to their beliefs, or just because someone didn't agree with you, you're going to show your masculinity by the only way I can resolve it is through fighting.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's that's hard. It goes to what we started this conversation off in saying. It's a very subjective, and no one definition fits everybody.
True. That's true. It should
Now,
be that way.
it's well, I don't think it will ever be that way, because we all have different personalities,
Mhm,
and it goes to what was repeated earlier. Strength comes in more than physical. Being mentally strong can display a lot of masculinity too.
mhm. I agree. I agree. But at the same time, are we well, let me ask you this. And mind you, I wanted to not only talk about um masculinity in the Black community, but masculinity in the Black gay community, because
Okay.
when you really look at it, it's two different communities, although a lot of times they they bleed into one another. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you, are there parameters around masculinity and what's deemed as masculine or in the Black gay community?
I wouldn't say they're unrealistic.
Okay.
I would say that the gay community has their own ideal of what masculinity is and the role it plays in the black gay community.
Mhm.
If you're considered that alpha male, which is typically associated with being masculine,
Mhm.
there it goes to what you and I had talked about earlier, but it goes to the role expectation that is expected out of that person because of what he is displaying.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
So if you sit
That's a
next to Macho Man, and without getting overly descriptive, and you find out that you got this burly 6'2" man sitting next to you who has it going on. He may be, and I'm just using this as an example, he may be a military man, a police or something, things that you automatically consider to be masculine. And then you find out, through whatever way, oh, he's a bottom. It throws off that whole image of what one perceived as being masculine. And
okay.
I don't want anybody to comment. Yes, you can have some very masculine bottoms.
True.
Absolutely. But I'm just saying, if you're trying to pinpoint what masculinity looks like and the roles that they play in the gay community, you don't necessarily associate a bottom being an alpha male.
No comment. No. But no, so okay. We will talk about like roles, right? But taking it a step further, the whole DL culture, right? And not
Correct.
knocking our DL brothers, of course, you come out when you're ready to come out, or you're entitled to live your life, right? If that's how you choose to do it. I think the only thing that I would have to say as far as someone who's on the DL, like at some point, you deserve to be able to stand in your truth unapologetically. So hopefully you do at some point realize that, going through those extra motions to hide who you are, it's a task. It's a lot more a lot more life to be lived. So to each his own, but just know, we're here to support always.
Always
Um,
here to support. For
but
me, it's harder to live a lie
right,
than it is to live in my truth.
right, and that would be my message. But my point to that is many black gay men feel as though they have to hide their sexuality because they're either seen as being weak or not a man, or like, oh, I think that pressure that is already on black men when it comes to masculinity is heightened almost when you factor in that, okay, you know what I'm saying, he actually is gay. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I do. I think it's heightened more. I think that in turn, for gay men, it leads to, or gay men, bi men, or whomever it is that feels like they have to hide. I think it leads to those other negative things like being ashamed or isolating yourself, not coming out, staying away from people, or even depression.
I think that I would like to think that just about any gay person has experience, because you never know until you come out what the outcome is going to be among
True.
your family, your friends, your coworkers. So for that reason, I guess I can say we, but I know myself, I chose to hide behind that wall for so long because I didn't want to
Really?
deal with, you know, possible rejection. No one wants rejection, first of all,
True.
but you hide it or put up this wall. And at a certain point, at least for me, at a certain point, you know my favorite line, and I say it in every episode. They're gonna judge me regardless.
They
So,
gonna judge me regardless.
so at this point, it wasn't until that I really embraced and embodied that statement that I felt free.
Mhm.
Um, do I consider myself the world's most masculine man and expect my picture to be in the Webster Dictionary? No, but I also know that I'm not the at the bottom of the spectrum.
Right. But so look at it this way. You are ultimately trying to navigate an intersection of two, how can I put it,
Two worlds.
two marginalized identities, two different, you know what I'm saying? And it's almost like you have to have this double consciousness when you move about, because you have to be aware on this side how you showing up, aware on that side how you showing up. And we've talked about this before, I think in a earlier episode, where I'm like, okay, well, do I stand on this side of the street or that side of the street? Oh hell, well, both sides of the street are occupied, so I got to walk in the middle, you know what I'm saying? So it's and forming it better, it's an intersection of two marginalized identities, whereas on one hand, you're dealing with being a black man, and then on the other hand, you're dealing with being a black gay man. So it becomes it's hard to um have that constant negotiation on who you are, what your identity is, especially when it can be different contexts that you have to show up. That makes sense?
Okay. It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. Sorry, I got real passionate there.
You're fine. But I have a question. Do you, in each of your settings, think about work, home, and in public?
Mhm.
Do you think you display masculinity different in each of those settings?
Yes.
Give me your, how do you navigate the work scenario?
Honestly, I don't marinate on it as much as I probably once did because I'm like I know who I am now. Like
You're at peace.
I'm at peace. Like if you got a problem, as long as you don't say anything to me, have your problem. I'm gonna live my life and do me over here. You know what I'm
Absolutely.
saying? But I think that we show up based off of what the situation requires of us. Um, because there will be some moments where I'm with my son and I might see a spider and I hate spiders. So I might in that moment show up and, bam, I got it. Everything is good. But if it's just me and my husband, babe, come get it. I'm being real. And then at work, like depending on the setting, like I might have a little moment like, girl, there's and I might throw a little extra in there, but that's me. But then
But is it with all the coworkers or with the
if I'm
coworkers that you're comfortable with?
if I'm in exactly, I was gonna say, if I'm in a situation and there's somebody that I'm not comfortable with,
Hmm.
9 times out of 10, and I'm an introvert anyway. So if I'm uncomfortable, 9 times out of 10, I'm not gonna interact much because I'm ready for it to be over with anyway. Like, just saying. I will say, I do think um toxic masculinity is a problem in both the black gay community and the black community as a whole. And I think that it can lead to those things, those negative, toxic behaviors that are a result of the expectations that we put on masculinity. Like I said before, misogyny, you can throw in there domestic violence, sexual assault, again homophobia,
Hmm.
because in their minds they have to and sometimes and I've truly been around guys who will be cool with you like, hey, what's up, bro, how you doing, how's the family, blah 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 blah, and we chalk it up, it's a good guy right here. And the moment that someone who they feel will question their masculinity in having a conversation with the gay guy, and this is goes back to the friendship episode, I oftentimes will be concerned with how my straight friends have to, or what they have to put up with since they are friends with somebody who's gay,
Hmm.
because I'm aware of those expectations on their masculinity. But I feel like all those things lead to those all those expectations, let me be clear, those a lot of times erroneous, unhuman or inhumane expectations that we put on another human being on how they have to act in order to be seen in a particular way in our eyes. And it's like it's you can't have both. You get what I'm saying?
Correct.
So how do we challenge that? How do we change the narrative, or at least start to change it? Well, the conversations are being had, which is amazing. The conversations are being had. How do we continue the conversations beyond this? And how do we really challenge what that looks like?
I think it. stems from starting with our young boys going into preteen, early adulthood. It starts from with the home.
Mhm.
I'm never going to say it starts within school. It starts with being at home. And the very first thing is being acceptive of people,
Mhm.
regardless if they don't act as masculine as you may want. Telling our young men and young girls that the level of masculinity is never going to be the same in two men, whether
Mhm.
gay or straight,
Mhm.
but you accept them for who they are because they are an individual. But I think where we go wrong in not only our community, but any community, is that because we already have an expectation of what we think masculinity is, that if you see something that doesn't fit the norm that you believe and you have your children around, you make the comment in front of them, oh, look at him. He's not, he's a weakling. So you question 10 years later when your child is suspended from school or gets into a fight because of something they said about someone, but you don't think about the statements that you made inside your own home 10 years ago or out at the mall and you saw something that didn't fit the norm and you
Mhm.
make that comment and you wonder where they learned it from.
True. True. In teaching them, and even with those that are I feel like sometimes you can teach old dogs new tricks. So,
Absolutely.
I think challenging them, well, promoting emotional intelligence, that's one. Promoting emotional intelligence, and vulnerability, like helping them to see that it's okay to express your feelings, to share what's going on with you, asking for help when you need help. You know what I'm saying? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another way to help change the narrative.
It's an ongoing learning, continuous education. It
Hmm.
never stops.
It never stops. Actually, I'll add in there um, another thing that can help fix that problem, and I'm gonna call it a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the continuing to give diversity in media, having those conversations when it is shown, like, and I will admit now more than ever we are seeing more black gay male representation. It's still that much, but we are seeing it, right? So I think the continued promoting of diversity in the media and entertainment, and I think celebrating those men who kind of defy what that stereotype is, celebrating them and kind of giving an example, right? So, like you said, teaching them. So, you know what? Actually, the fact that he just cried was probably the most masculine thing, or you know what I'm saying? That's what you would do in that situation. And it's okay to cry, or whatever that looks like. Basically, I think continuing to put those different examples in front of us can help shift the mindset.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Crying is, in my eyes, crying is actually sexy to see a man cry. And I mean, and I know tears are not always associated with positive things, but the
Mhm.
fact that he can be honest enough to say, this is hurting me, you know, whether
Yeah.
it's a loss of a family member or just some other scenario that's going on in their immediate life that has brought them enough to bring them to tears. I'm actually concerned about the person that don't shed a tear
Yeah. Yeah.
because to me, you are really compressing
Mhm.
And that can be toxic in its own way, because when it does finally come out, how is it going to come out?
True. True. That is true. All right, buddy. Well, we did that. I think the discussion definitely needs to continue. And even furthermore, I think we should spend, like I said, more time celebrating when we do see those different examples.
We didn't cover everything, but we touched on a lot of the things that we wanted to get across.
I think I'm taking away the fact that, again, masculinity in itself is complex, right? It's complex. It can vary, not just from situations, but it varies in cultures. So I think that just remembering that further helps me know, okay, I'm in the right space as far as my mind. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? So that's what I'm taking away. Thanks for joining another episode of Let's Get to Talking, presented to you by Black Gay Table Talk.